Every catastrophe begins quietly, a distant vibration, a reading on a monitor that no one notices. And then, the planet exhales. When Earth moves, burns, or floods, it follows a rhythm. 10 levels of impact, each one stronger, faster, and more irreversible than the last. These are the RIP levels, the real impact phases, the timeline between the first warning and the final silence. Let's begin at Level 1. Level 1. Everything catastrophic begins as a whisper, a tremor too small to feel, a thunderhead too far to fear, a volcano's sigh mistaken for wind. In 2023 alone, over 1.3 million earthquakes registered worldwide, yet more than 90% released less energy than a single bolt of lightning. Most passed unnoticed, but every so often, one of those tiny quakes is the first domino in a deadly chain. Meteorologists call this phase the anomaly window, when pressure, humidity, or ground strain crosses a hidden line. On average, weather satellites detect 45,000 storm cells per day. Only 1 in 1,000 becomes a named cyclone. At Level 1, data scientists listen, humanity scrolls. It's the stage where the planet clears its throat and no one hears it. Every disaster starts as data, until someone dies to confirm it. Level 2. Deep underground or high in the troposphere, energy accumulates. Fault plates grind at a few centimeters per year, but each centimeter stores billions of joules of tension. A cubic kilometer of magma pressurizes like a loaded heart. The air above warm oceans turns to fuel. This is the stress line, where equilibrium fails but hasn't yet broken. In 1980, Mount St. Helens recorded more than 10,000 mini-quakes before its eruption. In the 2011 Tohoku disaster, Japan's seismic network logged hundreds of foreshocks within 72 hours of the main magnitude 9.0 quake. Every reading was a warning. No one knew which would be the one. The world is full of stress lines, levees in Louisiana, glaciers in Greenland, gas fields beneath Naples. Each one quietly decides how the next century will burn or drown. To humans, it's invisible. To Earth, it's inevitable. Disasters don't begin with movement, they begin with resistance. Level 3. At Level 3, containment fails. Pressure meets permission. It's the moment a storm crosses warm water and organizes into a cyclone. The instant a fault rips open and the crust shifts faster than sound. The second a dam wall cracks or a volcano coughs out its first ash cloud. The breach is instantaneous and mathematical. One eruption can release energy equal to 10,000 Hiroshima bombs. A Category 5 hurricane unleashes 600 terawatts of heat energy, the output of every power plant on Earth combined. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it hurled 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, lowering global temperatures by 0.6 degrees Celsius for 2 years. Nature's breaches don't just destroy cities, they edit the planet. For the people nearby, it's not numbers, it's impact. Wind that strips skin, waves that outpace cars, ash that turns day to night. At this level, there's no going back. Containment has become a consequence. You never see Level 3 coming. You only see what it takes with it. Level 4. Now the disaster develops a personality. Hurricanes find eye walls. Wildfires create their own weather. Earthquakes spawn tsunamis that rewrite coastlines. This is the surge phase, energy in motion, fully self-sustaining. During the 2020 Atlantic season, there were 30 named storms, 13 of them hurricanes. Hurricane Laura's winds hit 241 kilometers per hour, while storm surges in Louisiana reached 5.4 meters. At that height, a single cubic meter of moving seawater weighs a ton and travels with the force of a truck every second. In 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake displaced the seafloor by 15 meters, launching waves that killed 230,000 people across 14 countries. That wave crossed the ocean at 800 kilometers per hour, the speed of a jet plane. At Level 4, human systems collapse in minutes. Communications fail, power grids short, evacuation plans become memories. The difference between life and death is measured in altitude and luck. Psychologically, this is the panic stage. Adrenaline kicks in, reason evaporates. People run in the same direction as wind and water because it feels like escaping. But at level 4, you don't outrun nature, you just become part of its data. At this speed, survival is measured in breaths, not miles. Level 5. Silence is the loudest sound after a catastrophe. When the winds settle and the fires dim, what remains is not peace, it's vacuum. The numbers appear first. The 2010 Haiti earthquake, magnitude 7.0, over 220,000 deaths, 300,000 injured, 1.5 million homeless. The 2019 cyclone Idai, winds of 195 kilometers per hour, 1,200 killed, $2.2 billion damage. Every figure is a decimal version of grief. Then comes the secondary wave, disease, famine, displacement. After Pakistan's 2022 floods, stagnant waters triggered malaria outbreaks that infected over 1.6 million people. After wildfires in Australia, 2020, smoke covered 80% of the population and caused an estimated 400 premature deaths from inhalation alone. This is the longest RIP level, measured not in hours, but in years. Infrastructure crumbles, economies spiral, trauma settles into the soil. And yet, something begins here too. Regrowth, adaptation, a species with short memory and infinite hope starts again. The planet heals because it doesn't remember pain, only balance. Humans heal because we refuse to remember fear, only story. When the numbers fade, the narratives begin, and that's how civilizations forget they were warned. Level 6. The disaster ends. The planet remembers. When the flames die and the floodwaters drain, the echo phase begins. Slow, invisible, far more dangerous. After the 2010 Deepwater Horizon blowout, 4.9 million barrels of oil coated the Gulf of Mexico. Even 13 years later, dolphins there show 50% higher infant mortality rates. Ash from Australia's 2020 megafires fertilized the Pacific, triggering one of the largest algal blooms ever recorded. 9.4 million square kilometers, visible from orbit. Each catastrophe seeds another. CO2 from wildfires in 2020 alone equaled 1/5 of all global emissions that year. Glacial melt after heat waves accelerated sea level rise to 4.4 millimeters per year, doubling the 20th century average. At level 6, the planet runs a delayed fever. Rain becomes acidic. Rivers reverse course. Forests burn not once a century but once a decade. The environmental echo doesn't explode, it lingers, rewriting chemistry molecule by molecule. Level 7. When the ground breaks, people follow. By now, the disaster leaves geography, it enters humanity. In 2023, the UN counted 110 million displaced people, the highest ever recorded. Climate-linked displacement, storms, floods, drought, now accounts for 70% of all new refugees each year. When Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines in 2013, winds reached 315 kilometers per hour. It displaced 4 million people overnight. Haiti's 2010 earthquake destroyed 250,000 homes, collapsing an economy for a decade. Sociologists call this phase secondary collapse, when infrastructure failure triggers social breakdown. Power loss, water shortage, disease, housing loss, migration, conflict, food loss, inflation, unrest. The World Bank predicts that by 2050, 216 million people could become climate migrants. It won't be a wave, it'll be a tide. In this level, empathy and order fight for survival. History shows that only one usually wins, temporarily. The storm ends faster than the panic it leaves behind. Level 8. Level 8 is where disaster becomes infrastructure contagion, the domino phase. One broken node triggers another. A power plant floods, cooling fails, grid collapses, hospitals darken, data centers go silent. When Hurricane Sandy struck New York in 2012, storm surge flooded 51 square kilometers of cityscape, shutting down 25% of cellular networks and cutting power to 8.6 million people across 15 states. A single rupture in the grid paralyzed subways, froze trading floors, and silenced emergency dispatchers for 48 hours. One storm, one city. Yet it cost $70 billion and reshaped national disaster policy. The pattern repeats. In 2021, Western Europe's floods submerged power substations and disabled 450 telecom towers, 1 million electric meters, and hundreds of water treatment plants in under 24 hours. In Pakistan, 2022, one-third of the national grid collapsed. Digital banking, fuel logistics, and food distribution fell with it. Floodwater short-circuited both wires and systems of trust. Even developed nations remain brittle. A 2023 UN report estimated that 80% of developing economies lack flood-resistant power networks, and that every dollar not spent on resilience costs 6 in recovery, yet global infrastructure spending still favors expansion over fortification. At this level, resilience meets reality. Cables laid decades ago, bridges never upgraded, drainage channels clogged by progress. Each becomes a failure point. Cyber and physical networks intertwine so tightly that when one node goes dark, the others choke from shockwaves of information delay. The result is a modern paradox. The more connected a civilization becomes, the faster it can collapse. In the system cascade, failure is no longer local, it's networked. The 21st century's disasters don't just break things, they break systems that keep things from breaking. Level 9. When the planet reacts to itself. At level 9, the disaster stops being isolated and starts becoming recursive, a self-amplifying feedback loop where one crisis fuels another. The planet begins to answer its own injury. Melting permafrost holds 1,600 billion tons of carbon, twice the total humans have emitted since 1850. As Arctic soil warms, methane plumes bubble through thawed peatlands, a gas 80 times more potent than CO2 over 20 years. Each ton released traps more heat, melting more ice, unlocking more carbon, a biological chain reaction disguised as geology. Wildfires in Siberia and Canada now burn 6 times more land than in the 1990s, darkening the Arctic snowpack and cutting reflectivity by 15%. That lost brightness absorbs heat, raising regional temperatures by another 2 degrees Celsius each decade. The oceans absorb 90% of the excess heat, expanding and feeding stronger cyclones. When those storms destroy coastal mangroves, natural barriers that once absorbed 1 billion tons of CO2 a year, the cycle tightens. Scientists call this the Earth System Sensitivity Threshold. Cross plus 2 degrees Celsius and models project 25% more, Category 4 to 5 storms, 40% less polar ice volume, 1 in 20 chances of runaway warming beyond 4 degrees Celsius by 2020. At plus 4 degrees Celsius, half of humanity's current farmland would face chronic drought. Sea levels could rise up to 2 meters by 2015. By then, today's coastal megacities would be legends told underwater. Yet feedback isn't just physical, it's economic and political. Each disaster drains national budgets, reducing resources to prevent the next. Recovery spending spikes emissions through reconstruction, while displaced populations crowd urban zones, straining power, food, and water systems further. The loop tightens socially as well as thermally. The consequences aren't cinematic explosions, they're gradual extinctions. Coral reefs bleaching into deserts, jet streams meandering like loose threads, monsoons shifting hundreds of kilometers off course. Each year now brings new extremes once labeled 1-in-100-year events. In 2023 alone, the world recorded $23 billion disasters in just 8 months, the most ever tracked by NOAA. At level 9, the word disaster loses its plural. There is no single flood, no isolated fire, no separate storm. There's only climate, a continuous event wearing different masks. Level 10. Silence again, but not peace. A new equilibrium, colder in some places, hotter in others. The planet has rewritten its own code. This is the reset, the moment ecosystems decide who stays. After the end Permian extinction 252 million years ago, 96% of marine life vanished. Earth's temperature spiked 8 degrees Celsius. It took 10 million years for coral reefs to return. Humanity isn't exempt from that math. If the Greenland ice sheet melts entirely, a 3% probability by 2100 under current warming, Sea levels rise 7.4 meters, submerging Miami, Shanghai, Dhaka, and Amsterdam. But reset doesn't always mean extinction. After Mount Toba's supereruption 74,000 years ago, a volcanic winter that shrank human populations to under 10,000 breeding pairs, the species rebounded, adapted, innovated, crisis rewrote intelligence. In level 10, Earth reclaims rhythm. The carbon cycle stabilizes, oceans absorb excess CO2, new forests take root on forgotten coastlines. But the cost is counted in civilizations erased, languages drowned, archives burnt. To the planet, it's restoration. To us, it's a requiem. The countdown began long before we noticed, with a whisper in the soil, a flicker on a radar, a single degree on a thermometer. Now, standing in the calm between storms, we call it the new normal. But normal is just the pause between RIP levels.